What's up, guys? The dollar is starting to stagnate. The stock market is finding support. We're going to go over the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the IWM, the dollar, the 30-year bonds, and the crypto markets. All right, so without further ado, let's get started with the video. So number one, this is the dollar. Very plainly, I just wanted to show you guys how the dollar, we were very overextended to the upside in terms of being away from the Bollinger Bands. And I was saying how generally when that happens, that is a good sign that we return back inside. So as we were very overextended for multiple days in a row here, the dollar eventually needed a day of returning back inside, and now we're consolidating within the Bollinger Bands. So this weakness and this small period of consolidation led to the stock market also finding support. So here's the dollar. Next, I want to show you guys the 30-year bonds. So now when looking at the 30-year bonds, this is interesting because the bonds are showing a lot of weakness. The bonds are continuing to show continued weakness, closing outside of the lower level of the Bollinger Bands multiple times now. But of course, we're going to also take a look at the stock market, but the bonds are not as, so basically the stock market is not as overextended to the downside as the bonds are. So the bonds have a lot more room to go. But then at the same time, it's a very good indication that this weakness cannot sustain itself in the bonds. So there should be also a similar period of consolidation or a small bounce inside, similar to what we saw with the dollar, how we went inside from overextension to the upside. The bonds should have a similar return to the inside from the bottom. So there's that for the bonds. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the SPY. All right, so this is one of the interesting things that I'm looking towards. So this is the SPY, obviously, right? So I drew a fib line from the most recent high on August 16th to today's low. And generally, what basically happens, we should always, it's a very high likelihood that we return back to at least to the 23.6% fib. And that number here is 416.19. So there's a very high likelihood chance that we touch that level. And from there, and there's also a very good chance that we hit 419.16, which is a 38.2% fib. But the 23.6% fib is generally one of the safest plays for an upward target to a bounce. So basically, what you do is you take the local high to the local low, and the odds of us touching the 23.6% fib after that movement is very high. So I would be very concerned if the market makes new lows without touching this 22.6, because then it would lead to a lot of weakness. So I guess we could use that as good confirmation of weakness. So because of the high success rate of bouncing to the 23.6, if this doesn't work and we break these lows, then that is going to show a lot of weakness. So this works out in both ways, whether we make money playing to the long side for this, or whether we use it as a confirmation as it breaks. So there's that. We could also see that the MACD is extremely very oversold. The RSI is slowly moving upwards. Obviously, this isn't the most bullish, that the RSI is sensitive to a small move to the upside in the SPY. This is showing weakness. But the MACD is showing that there's still a lot of firepower and more room to the upside. So we're going to also take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin's MACD moved very sensitively, but you can see that the SPY had a decent green move, but the MACD is still falling lower. So it went from yesterday, it was negative 6.86. Today, it's negative 9.05. That value was right here, this blue value. So it went down about 2 points, which is showing a lot of strength. So the MACD value itself went down, but the price went up. So that's showing strength. So conflicting signals in the MACD and the RSI, but price action is showing stability above this level of support. And the odds of us touching this 22.6 is high. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that happens. So there's that for the SPY. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ, similar situation, found support. And now we basically have to bounce. So now we're going to see if we can bounce to the 23.6% fib at 318. And similar situations to the SPY, the MACD is falling. The RSI is moving slightly upwards. So the RSI looks a bit better than the SPY's RSI. But overall, if it breaks these lows without touching 318, then that is going to confirm that it's going to fall very, very sharply. And yesterday we were also looking at the Bollinger Bands on the NASDAQ as well. So we can see that the Bollinger Bands are continuing to move upwards, and it's not that far away. So we're only about 2%. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're only about 2.18% away from the lower level of the Bollinger Bands. So once we hit that level, it's not necessarily, that doesn't automatically mean that we're going to bounce. That means that things can start really, really tumbling very quickly. And the only way we would really start aggressively going long is if we are extremely overextended to the downside. Even if we close one day, even if we were to close one day outside of the lower level of the Bollinger Bands, that's not an extreme overextension. An extreme overextension would be maybe after day 2. But usually, like when the first, the multiple times this year so far when I've had like the really, really big days, it was when we were opening outside. When the SPY itself opened outside of the lower level of the Bollinger Band, that is like the best situation to go long that we've seen so far this year. So that's that would be ideal if we basically break this level of support. In terms of trading, this is would be like the best case scenario. If we break this level of support without ever even touching the 23.6, and then we short as it falls, right? Basically with a stop loss at around 317. And then essentially we short the market to the extreme weakness, and hopefully we catch a bottom based on the extreme cascading selling pressure. And that would basically be like a really, really solid sequence of trades if that were to happen. So yeah, I guess we just have to wait and see if that does end up happening. So there's that for the NASDAQ. Let's go ahead and take a look at the IWM. So the IWM, same concept. It's very, very strong. The MACD is falling, so this is bullish. The RSI, it's sort of sensitive, so that's not as bullish. And the same concept for the NASDAQ and the SPY. The IWM is very, very strong. We already saw that it touched the 22.6, but it failed to close above the 20 exponential moving average. So if this strength persists in the IWM, then the IWM is going to continue being the main reason why the SPY is also bouncing, because we've seen that the NASDAQ has been underperforming compared to the IWM. So if the IWM can start closing above the 20 exponential moving average here at 192.99, essentially 193, and especially above today's high at 193.30, then that would be very, very bullish for the SPY and the NASDAQ especially. And bulls are going to be looking for a break above 417 again on the SPY, and then the key psychological level of 420. So it's going to be interesting to see if this is support. But then once we start showing some weakness, if we get a good bounce to 416 to 420, and we start to show some weakness, and if these indicators have given up basically a lot of their steam, have already crossed over, but we're still trading over here somewhere, then that means that there's not as much room to the upside. And if the RSI has already crossed above and moved substantially, then it would be a good idea to start scaling into longs over here, or scaling into puts over here. So then heading into September, we would have a a good red, you know, close. So yeah, there's that for the stock market. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the really weak crypto market. So Bitcoin looks very, very weak. We can see that the MACD has basically almost crossed above. We were extremely oversold here on the MACD, gave up all of this momentum to the upside, and we couldn't even break above levels of resistance on Bitcoin. So usually when we are this oversold on the MACD, with that much space away from the yellow MACD line, that means that there's a lot of upside potential. And usually, if any other, like usually when a stock is normally strong, it would have bounced well above this resistance because there's so much upside room. But the fact that Bitcoin could not even use this oversold condition on the MACD to break above this trend line is very, very bearish. This was literally at a low of 20.7 and we hit a high of 20. It was about 21,892. So this was less than $1,000, and we moved all the way up. So this is showing a lot of weakness. Obviously the MACD on the SPY and the NASDAQ is not as weak, so which is a good thing. But yeah, so overall the crypto market is very, very weak, and I would say it's acting more forward looking in terms of sentiment. So overall stock market sentiment is not bullish, so there's no reason why the crypto market would be bullish as well. And we were seeing that crypto was underperforming the SPY this entire time, right? So when the SPY was at like 360, crypto was around 17.6, right? But we bounced all the way up to basically 430 on the SPY, which should have been an equivalent of like 28,000 at least, 26, 27,000 at least. But Bitcoin could not even break above 25.5. So we have been seeing that Bitcoin was very, very underperforming, and it's continuing to underperform. So that means that still investors are not bullish the stock market, and investors are definitely not bullish on the crypto market. So there's that for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.